Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Center Stage. I'm your host Rajiv, and today I'm very excited to have Sri Satish Ambati, the CEO from H2O.ai. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So we were just talking about math and music, and tell me a little bit about your philosophy when it comes to music and math.
So where we grew up in India, we call music Shastriya Sangeet, which is mathematical music or scientific music.
Right.
And so where music has its beats and its permutations, combinations, and lots of diverse ways of looking at things and patternizing them and finding those patterns.
Right.
And so we think that where music flows is where math also resides right next door.
Right.
And then being able to connect people at the level that music connects universally, I think is how AI and math can reach the same level of universality.
Yes.
It's kind of how H2O got created. H2O, water is universal. We think of that as a philosophy where it's transparent. There's very little side effects of water.
Right.
So we want it to be available, accessible the way people want to drink it, as opposed to asking them to learn our APIs. So we're kind of open and able to kind of come to them in the form they want to consume AI.
Okay.
And that's kind of the philosophy with which we built the company.
Love the philosophy. Love the correlation between math and science and music. I'm a tabla player. It's very mathematical, ending on the sum. Very intricate beats, which is rooted in math. And so you know
Tabla beats science.
Tabla beats science. If you guys don't know that, look it up. Zakir Hussain and Bill Laswell, amazing. And so you talk about democratizing AI and providing this open source for data scientists to experiment on your platform. Again, that creativity, that universal accessibility to artificial intelligence on your platform. What have you seen in terms of things that excite you for what is being experimented on your platform?
When we got started, it was really, we didn't have enough algorithms of high grade out in the open.
Okay.
Now Google, Goldman Sachs, Netflix, Amazon, they have been the pioneers in trying to build high grade engineering backing algorithms and using those algorithms in different verticals, obviously.
Okay.
But the rest of the world didn't have good algorithms and good implementations of these algorithms. So our mission was to democratize that. First, let the algorithms be implemented in open source, plugged into other open source platforms or movements like R and Python and Spark. So you quickly build those and plug them into other open source movements.
Okay.
So it get mass adoption very quickly. But that led to the next level, which is how do I use an algorithm to solve a problem?
Yep.
And a problem could be very simple as where to place the ad, to kind of, is this a fake ad, is this a fake web page in the marketing sense, to how to price my products, how to send email marketing. Now, Macy's became an early customer. Truly, I was trying to figure out what's a fixer-upper, right, sort of based on the description of the home.
Okay.
Very simple problems in the early days.
Right.
To fraud prevention. So
Okay.
we are actually powering some of the largest payment systems online and in the cards.
8 out of 10
businesses
banks use your platform, I believe.
for fraud prevention, for subprime credit scoring.
Subprime credit scoring.
In
yep.
subprime credit scoring, longevity or tenure is a big thing to predict. Turns out 75% of America is actually is a daily wage earner.
75% daily age earner.
Very large, very large.
Massive.
Which means a nurse, an ER nurse, is a different, has different tenure than a regular nurse.
Okay.
But all of their categories will say nurse.
I see.
Right? So
But there's those nuances that make a difference.
that can make a big difference in whether you will pay back the loan you have taken or not. And I think what is traditionally prime is well understood, but in the subprime, you need much more sophisticated algorithms to understand. So, and so for us, democratization of AI meant the democratization of credit, democratization of health, democratization of ability of a lot of other verticals.
Okay.
And so over time, what we learn now is that
Finance, retail, different industries.
in almost every vertical and every company will become an AI company. That was kind of the core mission we've had. And initially we provided the algorithms and we saw what will they do with it. Then the amount of data scientists, the talent shortage of good data scientists meant that we had to automate a lot of this machine learning model making. And at least to the extent we can automate it. So that's led to our second generation platform called AutoML. or driverless AI.
Right.
And then from there, we're now beginning to open that up for verticalization. So customers, domain experts can now participate in AI and start tweaking it to solve more vertical problems like anti-money laundering in the finance world, or trading, different strategies for trading, which is what led to a strong partnership with Goldman Sachs. Or even credit risk in the grand scheme of things, benchmarking models, so that you can understand that they're not biased. You can trust the models.
They're not biased. Okay.
And trust them.
Right.
So the talent, time, and trust, the three big vectors in adoption of AI, we're trying to kind of make that easier to do for large businesses.
Okay.
But as we do that, we also make it easy to do for the small, medium businesses as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And help me understand, what is the difference in your opinion between a data scientist and a data engineer?
So data engineers are inundated with the rise of data. Right? Sort of, if you think about, the traditional source of data is applications. Right? Sort of, once we became online, once we created social networks, we started creating enormous amount of data in an exponentially fast-growing pace.
Right.
So that led to kind of your big data revolution before the AI revolution. And of course, in my view, they were both like sister revolutions, because data, every time people complained of data, better math made that easy to understand. And that's historical. Like Abacus was invented when we couldn't count based on our fingers. Right? So historically, when we had more things to count, we created math. So for me, I saw the rise of AI as a necessary next step for the rise of data. So data engineers are essentially the ones who are making sure we're compressing the data, storing them in the right format, in an inexpensive way. So if you think of DBAs in the year, in the kind of the classic year 2000 era, where we created the first internet applications, we're storing all the data in databases.
Yep.
Now, fast forward to 2010, we started storing them in file systems and back to file systems in object stores, Hadoop, and the rise of those different. Right. So the DBA of that time and NoSQL now has become more of a data engineer of today, right? Sort of. But data engineer is still not looking at the mathematical patterns in the data. Okay. So the scientist essentially. You can call him a data scientist, but really he's a scientist, a physicist, typically, or a biophysicist, or in general, biotechnologist, started looking at data in a very scientific fashion. The two big things that, in my view, led to the general, I would say, it's an opulent era where scientists are accessible to lots of businesses. Yes. Because in year 2000, if you think about the two big things that were happening, informatics, which was consuming a lot of physicists and biologists who were mathematicians. Then you had financial world taking off like crazy, the derivative era. Financial analysts. Right? So by 2007 or 8, a lot of these businesses were not hiring anymore. Right. Right. So then that people essentially came into marketing, came into different departments of every other business. Right. And we coined them as data scientists in some sense. But the rise of data scientists is actually the post-2008 era. Right. Sure, of course. And so they became much more accessible. The Netflix recommendation engine price kind of coined the space into a data science focus space. I think if you now look back in 2012, 2013, data scientists were needed to take the data that's been managed by data engineers and to analyze it and to make businesses more efficient. Business processes becoming more efficient or reinventing business processes is how AI makes monetary sense. Right. And to some degree, the data scientists were essentially trying to help give pipelines back to data engineers. So eventually, the output of a data scientist is a PowerPoint slide or a scoring engine. A scoring engine is, so you're training a model with data, and out pops a scoring engine. Scoring engine is essentially scoring each event is good, bad, ugly, and that gets either deployed into an application, either on the application on the edge or on the cell phone. Right. So data engineers real deliverable was to give pipelines for application engineers to produce applications.
I see.
So data scientists are those intermediate people who are essentially looking at data, giving that scoring engines
To the data engineers.
to the data engineers,
Right.
so
And
they
then
can power
output it.
applications.
And you're talking about auto-generated rules. You're talking about auto tuning,
Yes.
auto scoring, leading to the edge.
Yes.
That's what you were kind of talking
Exactly.
about.
So,
Right.
so if you think about AI is not new, right? Sort of AI has historically actually failed us and succeed. Turing test is like mid last century. Around the 80s and 90s, the AI we call today, the AI of the time was expert systems.
Okay.
Many of us remember that. Those expert systems led to rule engines.
Yeah.
The rule engines are the policy servers that run most of the world's software today.
Sure.
Right. So the 80s, 90s AI led to the software revolution of the next 20 years. The AI of today is auto generation of those rules based on data.
I see.
And so in some sense, it's a continuum. It's not a discrete step, because there's the amount of data that is coming at us and the rate at which data is changing for the data engineers. No software engineer can keep up.
Sure.
And with the rules that have to be adapted.
Yes.
And as a result,
The AI.
AI will help.
Right.
So that's roughly what's happening.
Okay, and so bringing it back to the data scientists, and you've talked about sort of how that role is also going to evolve. Let's take a chief scientist, officer in a company, or a data scientist. They're going to play more of a strategic role in the company, help drive that strategy because of the data that they're analyzing and looking at. Tell me more about your perspective on that.
Yeah. So I think there's a philosophy that we kind of tend to apply in H2O, which is start with the data scientist first.
Okay.
Right. Sort of, and then ask him what to do.
Ask him or her what they do.
Right. Essentially.
Yeah.
And what would you do? Kind of. And then the first thing they will say is, "Oh, I need to go collect some data." Right, and which is great, because the fact that they're looking for data. There's a second auxiliary philosophy in statistics, the famous book Elements of Statistical Learning, written by Tibshirani and Toffer-Hasty and Friedman, who are our advisors. Is in God we trust, everyone else bring data.
Bring data.
Right. So then bring the data. So the data scientist always starts with the data first, which is great. But I think the data scientists, with the automatic machine learning at their fingertips, can now start answering more questions. But historically, the executive was tasked with the question of asking questions.
Right.
Right. But the rate at which he could ask questions was limited by rate at which the data scientist could provide the answers, because every question leads to the next answer, and then that answer leads to the next question.
Right.
Right. Sort of, it's a continuum in our search for truth about our businesses or about ourselves. And so I think that continuum of asking and answering is roughly what now can be even more closer if you have a data scientist at every strategy table. Right.
Okay.
And so what we see is actually data scientists rising up and becoming strategy scientists.
Right.
And the best example of strategy scientist is Jeff Bezos, right? He's running an amazing amount of experiments simultaneously at a faster pace. And because the cost of experiments are so low, because as a scientist, if you keep the experimentation cost low, then you can do a lot more mistakes.
Sure.
The
And learn
more
from them,
and learn from
improve,
them. And if you make new
improvise.
mistakes,
Right.
you can then conquer the world.
Sure.
And that's roughly kind of the vision we have for every business, is to rise the data scientists at the strategy level. And so then strategy science is no longer a McKinsey or a Boston Consulting that takes your problem and runs an experiment in a isolated place.
Right.
But
It's now
it's
part of
something
the-
you do every day.
The ecosystem.
Yes.
Right.
And that way you can agilely adapt your business
Right.
to what's happening in the world.
Right. Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Being agile, being able to experiment with data at your fingertips.
The interesting thing about that is that culture becomes a leading reason why AI success or failure depends on companies' cultures. If companies' cultures can adapt to change management is one of the biggest problem for my CIOs as they're taking AI into their companies. Is that groups of the best data scientists usually is not sitting next to the best business person or the best data engineer or the best software engineer or the best designer, right? In a hedge fund, they're all sitting next to each other.
Right.
But in a startup, they're probably also looking next to each other. I think what you see in large organizations is that they're really disparate. And so creating new organizational cultures that incentivize teamwork will lead to better outcomes.
Sure.
And over time, AI will no longer be a technology problem, but it will be a cultural problem because data will throw very surprising things at the leaders.
Okay.
And those surprising things will have to be explained, and the leaders should be able to emotionally react to it. That's why you need a good design for AI. But then react and act on it. If they do not act on those things, they still need the courage to act on these surprisingly different ways of looking at the world. Then those companies will not adapt. And I think so AI becomes more of a cultural problem. So I'll give an example of someone who's done this reasonably well.
Okay.
And essentially they ended up creating teams of 8.
Okay.
And teams of 8, they made sure that the average age of this team is greater than 42.
Okay,
Right?
and why is that?
Essentially, they want them to be culturally connected with the company,
Okay.
not just the fastest machine learning data scientists, but once the data scientists find something, if this particular team has the right cultural persona where they are connected, they are lived in the company long enough, they can go and make that business process change needed to see the effects of AI.
Okay.
So and by teams of 8, they put together a very strong group that ended up resolving a very big problem they were facing for loyalty.
For loyalty?
Their loyalty program.
I gotcha. Okay.
And that dramatically improved outcomes for the overall cards business.
So Sri, how does a company become an AI superpower?
So the source of all so AI H2O is an AI software company. A lot of AI software companies are around trying to build the AI software, AI cloud. I think the AI is powered by data, right? And some of the largest companies out there have built data because of a strong following and community they have built over the course of many decades.
Sure.
Sometimes. And that brand that they have is yielding them the feedback loop that they need. And so if we are living in a world where data is precious, and it's precious, but if it's not used, then it's sitting there idly and wasting away. Data also has an expiry date, right? So if you're not using the data so in credit cards, for example, any data that's 2 years old is no longer used for fraud prevention or for credit scoring because that data is like just stale.
Sure.
So you have to use it within a short amount of time, and
Okay.
there's companies that can adapt quickly or use that quickly.
Right.
So AI enables them to obviously easy access to AI or faster, cheaper, easier access to AI will make them use it better.
Okay.
So they're embracing the algorithmic way of looking at analyzing their data. The second piece is actually they're using it to protect their brands,
Okay.
which means they're focused on their customers. The biggest time and again since 1929 to 2007, the biggest disasters economies have faced were over-quantification, and the quantification was focused on the middleman, not on the end user.
Okay.
Right, so the traders or the exchanges became really good at doing a quantification. AI is another movement, a math movement, right? So that math movement, it focused on the end customers.
Right.
So someone becomes an AI superpower by taking AI and trying to really create new kind of data offerings for their customers. For their customers, it could be something like a score. So for example, Regalix could have the best personality score. They could create a best video score, best company scores, not just video.
Right.
So the media is the primary thing we do.
Right.
But
the
then
outcome.
the horizontal. When you're in a vertical, you're a retail company, and you think of the horizontal, the side effects of what you're doing to do good business in a retail company is trying to get a good supply chain, for example. That supply chain that's AI powered could potentially be useful for others in the business, to even others not even in your business but your customers.
Okay.
Right. So then you focus on what else can you create for your customers, not just the core vertical we are in. That transforms those companies into AI superpowers.
Okay.
A classic example again, of course, comes from whether it's Google or Microsoft or Amazon. They've managed to get away from their core vertical to becoming horizontal.
Right.
And that horizontal thinking is needed because our competitors are no longer in our vertical.
Competitors are no longer in the vertical.
And
Okay.
the tech giants are all entering the verticals.
Right.
And so the real competition is actually to be able to compete with these tech giants by using AI and the data assets one is sitting on.
Okay.
The other interesting aspect of this is that once you start thinking of this as a currency, in other words, intelligence as a currency, signal as a service, amongst your merchants ecosystem, amongst your customer ecosystem, you can now start going beyond just selling the classic pieces that you're selling, but you start thinking about the whole data ecosystem that you can steward,
Okay.
connecting not just your data, but with the data and create those alliances of the data of your merchants or your customers. And then you start now creating a much more richer services
Right.
that you can compose, and then create that much more AI as a service across the whole.
Using that intelligence and the data horizontally.
Exactly. Exactly.
Interesting. So let's talk about your journey a little bit. You've been the CEO for over 7 years at H2O.ai. You recently received funding over $72 million, congratulations, led by Goldman Sachs, which is also an unorthodox way of raising money, which was not in the Valley here. What has your journey been like as a CEO? What have you seen? What have you learned? You spoke a lot about culture. You know, you're talking a lot about data scientists and the importance of what role that's going to play today and in the future. What has that journey been like for you?
Yeah, and I think it starts, I can almost start from the last question you asked, which is, how do we make our customers AI superpowers? Right? So that's kind of roughly our mission that we had.
Right.
And to focus on that, we had to actually really get immersed into our customer experiences. We have almost a customer centricity that started by bringing them into our Series A, Series B, Series A. We had Transamerica as one of the insurance company trying to help us with vertical use cases in the insurance. Today, about almost all of the insurance companies are our customers, starting from the recent most nationwide to all the way till Transamerica. And that in Series B, we had a choice to take money from one of the top tier investors here, or make room for one of my customers, Capital One.
Right.
And we chose the other way, right? Sort of, which was actually an interesting lesson. We live to tell the story. Most companies don't. And Capital One ended up transforming and building us a whole, helping us build a whole vertical in cards, right? And Capital One itself was ready for that transformation, and we happened to be that perfect catalyst.
Right.
And almost all the executives from the top down were very quantitative in their thinking, and so that made us learn a lot, and we saw the effect of taking money from customers on the investment side, not just from the customer side.
Okay.
And that kind of stewardship of the customer kind of continued as part of our journey, which led us to think that customers are really the true north in any entrepreneur's thinking.
Because you understand their needs, their use cases, their pain points, what is it they're looking for, working with them as an alliance, as a partner, solve what you can based on the technology that you have.
Right.
Being the stewards, as you said.
The entire economy, I mean, all of this is based on the word trust, right?
Right.
So how do we build that, like, huge bounty of trust between different participants, whether it is when we are inventing, you're trying to build that trust from the receiver, right? So in this case, the customer's problems are the muse for an entrepreneur, right? Sort of, and if customers can explain explain and tell those things without any fear, then without any, like, they think of us as a long-term partner.
Sure.
Then suddenly you have a kind of
Trust.
amazing inbound set of requirements that become the war chest of innovations that you can then continue
The
to invent.
problems that you're just feeding off of to continue to solve.
Exactly.
Right.
Feedback, we have a philosophy which says feedback is gold, right? Sort of, sometimes in open source, we get feedback in bounties, right? Sort of plenty. And our philosophy of being open source from day one, the earliest days, allowed us to then start building large communities very quickly.
Okay.
Community building is at the heart of all innovators or all revolutionary thinking. If you can build a strong community around your mission, we were the first or the second .ai domain, and at the time, data science was a science project, right? Sort of in 2011,
Sure.
and people would say, "Wow, we heard of SAS before SAS in our MBA programs. We don't know much about it. It's that company in North Carolina, and I don't know if you will be building something that can be interesting." Those are the questions that usually get thrown at. And of course, in this, you have strong partners from your family. Which sort of my wife is a huge, I would put her as a co-founder of my life and the company.
Right.
In the sense that she essentially would say, Sri, if everybody is saying no, then it's either a terrible idea, or it's so crazy that it's really great.
They don't get it, right.
So then we thought it may be really great, and so we continued, and the rest.
Well, you
is
held to your
some history.
conviction because you knew that this is actually, I know what I'm doing. Everyone else hasn't seen it yet. They will watch and see, and of course, that's what's happened.
Right. I think entrepreneurs have to just, I mean, even when they think they believe in themselves, they need to believe in themselves double more, double down even more. And I think AI is actually one of those things I think will unlock more imagination. If you think about AI, it's compressing several cycles of scientific experimentation in an automatic fashion with less error, so preventing overfitting, preventing leakage. So you're kind of condensing the difficult art of doing science into something that is semi-automatic and probably in a box, right? So now if you box science back, imagine what the world was 500 years ago. It was filled with rich imagination, all the fairy tales we ever read, all the music that we have seen, all the innovation that has happened before was imagination. If you think about the power source of our imagination, it comes from LA, which is where most of the Hollywood
movies,
thinking comes, right? Sort of sci-fi. Star Trek, right? Sort of I do a lot of Star Trek, watch a lot of Star Trek with my daughters, and they always thought that everything in Star Trek was invented. Dad just didn't have the money to buy them yet, right? So that kind of imagination will be unlocked again. And then science provides that safety net so that you can essentially, with a good bit of courage and imagination, you can unlock more entrepreneurship worldwide. And that's kind of our mission as an AI company, is to make everyone an AI company, every entrepreneur to unlock his imagination. And if there's a purpose, and he or she can collect the data sets for that purpose. With AI, they can now start producing a good kind of your first MVP, right? The first thing that they can take to the market and get feedback.
Get some data, get some feedback.
Once they get feedback, they have their own data. They have their own brand. And before you know, you have a company.
And it's going to unlock even more potential and more imagination.
Essentially. My vision as an entrepreneur is to just democratize entrepreneurship itself. Because the world today, I mean, if you think about trying to buy a home in Bay Area or New York City or anywhere else, it's quite impossible unless you're an entrepreneur, right? So the only way to get out of our...
Well, a successful entrepreneur.
Yes.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs who still can't afford to buy a home in the Bay Area.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs cannot afford to buy a home as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the interesting thing is that to buy a home should have been like the easiest thing for birds, bees, animals, everybody's like buys a home, right?
Sure,
So then how do you democratize something like that? So there are two ways to go about it. Right? One, you could potentially say, well, governments have to intervene, and we saw what that led to, right? Sort of. So the second way is, how do we get more people to own more things, right? Sort of the ownership is one of the ways to escape from the problems that we're seeing of inequality in the world. And how do we democratize that is the story of how do we democratize several levels of the difficulty in starting companies today is finding a great technical co-founder. And for the technical co-founder, the ability to find somebody who can market his idea, right? And I think now with open source, social networks, and AI, one can essentially reduce the time it takes to build something, get it out into the market, or time it takes to find someone to build something and get it into the marketplace. And I think that's kind of the core mission we have, is that over time, if you can remove the secrecy in fundraising, the secrecy in kind of it's not secrecy, but the mystique, right? It's not secret, but it is not easily accessible either. And one of the easiest things one can explain through our story is that if you focus on the customer, and most corporations today do have enough money in the bank. They could buy back their own shares, or they could invest. And I think what we latched on to them, what we kind of took heed of the fact that if they like us so much, if we are so important for their business, and we are the AI platform of choice at Wells Fargo, that led them to lead our Series C. Wells Fargo is a major bank, right? And so something similar happened at Goldman Sachs, where we became the default platform for their equities and trading, and that led them to say, well, this is great technology, let's invest in it.
Sure.
And so that's kind of one thing that, and now we're seeing like there are investments in several major companies, whether it's Coke or all the way till every vertical has its own fund.
Right.
So it's very easy. It's much more easier for entrepreneurs to truly focus into that. So it's no longer becomes who you know or how you're connected into the Valley ecosystem or into the ecosystem of your local area.
Right.
And so this is a much more democratic way of building companies.
I like that. And you said something about story. And so why is it important to tell a good storytelling as it relates to AI?
So the best ideas, like if you think about, Feynman did research on why Challenger exploded, right? Sort of in the 9th page of the slide deck, there's a 4th bullet point which said that the O-ring could have issues,
This
right,
is what,
under pressure.
1986, something like that.
But that's a scientific study,
Right.
and so most people know what's the most important thing in their business or in their project. But if they're unable to put that in the front page, in the headline, the reaction to it is not coming from the audience. And sometimes audience is an investor, sometimes audience is a customer, sometimes audience is the boss looking at the work you've done over the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And I
The
think
audience
that
is a critic.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the data scientists are passionate about data. They're 100% data. Now, if it goes one level up, the business user is 85% data, if you're lucky, and 15% story.
Right.
By the time you get to the executives, it's 99% story. By the time you get to the board, it's 100% story.
Right.
And we think that by the time we get to grandparenting, hopefully it is 100% stories, right? And so that kind of being able to tell stories is just so important from that nugget, that insight that comes out.
That's right.
Data science is also like an art form. Every artist, and you're an artist, you want to evoke a response to what you found. It's like a journalist, right? Sort of
emotional response.
That response leads to someone standing up and
so
working and saving the planet, right?
Right.
And that kind of
Inspiration.
that kind of infecting them with your mission
Infectious.
is just important.
Right.
We think that data journalism is the ancillary and much more. It's a gateway to the next space here. So data scientists 10 years ago is where data journalism today. Every department will have a data journalist. When someone goes to a marketing team and asks, what have you done for me? You want a simple story. And that story is a journalistic story because you're not only doing analysis on social networks, how the company is doing, you're also doing analysis on how the customers are doing, you're also doing how the products are doing. All of that's a story. And that journalistic storytelling is going to become the next epoch in science.
Rooted in data.
We are working on a product that would hopefully make that easier.
Oh, very cool. I can't wait to see it.
Ingest my data, produce the headline.
Nice. I'm gonna read something to you and tell me why is this important. Cry for what you want. What does that mean to you?
So essentially, I take a lot of inspiration from my daughters,
from kids,
children,
yeah.
right? And all of us have. The children are actually very passionate about what they want, right? They're always the other two things they do is that they're always busy, right? They try to be happy all the time.
Try to be happy,
right?
sure, yeah.
So
Don't be idle.
Yeah, and then never idle,
Right.
and they're continuously like they're playing tabla all the time, right? So they're not waiting for you to say give the time to do something.
Right.
But when they're passionate, when they want something,
Sure.
they are absolutely crying for it,
Right.
And they're crying till they get it. Right? And I think an entrepreneurs, and most of us, should think about life in the same fashion as that unilateral love for something that drives you. And if you didn't get it, it's okay to fall down the first time,
Right.
but brush away and then keep running.
Right.
And I think that's the kind of mindset that we kind of we like that, right? And there's also ancillary to this one, which is 3 things to learn from a child and 7 things to learn from a thief.
From a thief. Okay.
And one of them is actually a thief he acquires the most important thing that he risks his life every day he goes to work, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then of course, and then he acquires this maybe your expensive laptop, right? And then he sells it for just $20.
Right,
It's
right.
he doesn't give really value to what he's risked his life to get,
Right.
And then no matter what, he will take all the beatings, but he's not giving up what he was doing, right? And that's the kind of mission we started out. Like AI is what we were doing before it was popular, and it will be doing when it's not popular as well, right?
Right.
Sort of, and that's
Right.
kind of the fun part about why we are missionary about this is that we think that AI has failed us over the last about 100 years, if not more, and AI winter has set before, and what we are trying to do is to reduce the risk that underwrite the risk of AI as an ecosystem.
Okay.
And so we think of not as who's your competition. We think that every one of the AI vendors, partners, are trying to de-risk the use of AI in wide usage across every sphere and walk of life.
Okay.
And our mission as a company, H2O, is to de-risk it to a point where anyone can use it safely.
Okay.
And that's kind of, that's why that true north for us is, well, let's make AI successful. And
Right.
if everyone is talking about AI, we
Right.
feel like, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Right. And now let's
Well,
continue that.
Everyone's talking about AI, Sri, right? And there was a summit this past week in Shanghai with Elon Musk and the Alibaba co-founder, and they're talking about AI and the differences, where Elon Musk said, that humans are actually dumb, right? And he's
a good question.
he's very fearful about AI because if it gets into the wrong hands,
Yeah.
a lot of bad things can happen. I'm just curious, what is your philosophy on this? I know you're trying to create and democratize AI and create a safer and better world, but there is also inherent danger of this, super intelligent computer getting in the wrong hands.
I think I would probably be on Jack Ma's side on
Ma's
this
side,
one,
yeah.
mostly because AI is going to make us more human, right? The bulk of what makes us human is not being like a machine, right? And what we have begun to use since the Industrial Revolution is to treat humans as if they were machines. Right? We've stopped respecting the spirit in the man, the spiritual
emotion.
man,
Yeah, the spiritual man.
and the emotional man,
Right.
and that reaction to things that the empathy, right? Sort of, AI is going to give us that time, so it takes away the menial work, so you can actually now actually feel for things,
Okay.
not just
Be
move through
robotic,
things,
right.
now move through things, and that
Interesting.
kind of is what we are called human beings, not human bees, right? And beings is a process, and that process will get much better now, because now we have a colleague in
Right.
AI, and I think of course there is always this challenge that AI is going to overpower humans, but humans created AI, right? To some degree, we have been so resilient as a culture, as a race,
Right.
that I feel like it will be one of our best partners in making the world better
Okay.
for a large number of people and AI processes.
Right.
There will be rights for AI at some point.
Yeah.
It's not just rights for humans. So I think
Interesting,
once
yeah.
we not only will we go past the current dilemma of are all humans equal to are humans and things equal,
Right.
and I think that kind of universal thinking existed once back in the ancients.
Sure.
And I think it will come back to that. The universal thinking will come back, where we know the difference between what life and afterlife, death would be, right? So that when we suddenly become that being to non-being,
Right.
And AI is one of those things that can be that partner in our understanding of the world.
Amazing. I really appreciate that viewpoint. Yeah.
We think that there's a lot more things that AI cannot do, right? And this is the early phases in many ways, and AI is just in that early journey, and we're trying to get afraid of what's coming ahead.
Right.
At the same time, AI will discover things much faster,
Sure.
and probably even prolong life
Right.
to a large degree,
Right,
and,
right.
and make life even more meaningful. And that's
And
today.
untapped greater potential.
And look for the Superman, right? Sort of in man.
Yeah, right.
And I think that kind of discovery is waiting to happen, and we
Yeah.
are really.
How far do you think we are from that moment happening?
I think it's a continuous process. It's a continuous process. We're the younger generation, as we do AI for Kids programs sometimes in summers, we find out the younger generation is much more capable of working with the newer technologies, newer systems, but they're also much more agile, ability to learn from that AI. There's some places in China where the teachers are AI. Right, so if are the kids able to learn more from an AI teacher versus a regular program or regular software program or regular human teacher, and what will he learn differently?
Right.
So those are the various questions that are happening as we speak.
Lots of experiments.
I think a few generations from now we'll probably think about why how could we exist without AI? Just the way we think about how do we exist without Wi-Fi?
without my cell phone. Got it. Great stuff. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been an incredible episode of Center Stage. I'm Rajiv, your host. Once again, Sri Satish Ambati, CEO from H2O.ai. See you next time. Bye.